So it is 2:01 right now. My name is Lorran Garrison. I am a school psychologist out in San Diego. Thank you guys so much for showing up, like I said, about things that I'm absolutely passionate about, representation, diversity, and all those good things. Well, you're at the Elevating Trans Voice, celebrating the contributions of trans creators in comics and pop culture. Yay! What's the most fun thing that you guys brought or bought or seen at the con so far? Yes. Wow.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. Zhen, what'd you get?
A moth family.
Oh, you want to show? You want to show what you got? Show the squishies.
This was my in-between panels splurge.
Oh, that's so cute.
There's more.
You didn't need a family.
My moth family. Wow. Have some serotonin.
Oh, I love it. House of Serotonin. Absolutely wonderful. Okay. So I will have each presenter present themselves, and that is my QR code. So afterwards, if you have any questions or you wanted to contact anybody, you can do it through that. I wanted to give some land acknowledgement for the people that have taken care of this land before us. They're the Tongva people and the Akkemen tribes, and I apologize if I'm butchering it, but it's difficult to pronounce for me. But in any case, if you are always interested and curious about what land that you're on, there's maps, or you can look up the hashtag Honor Native Land. All right, once again, my name is Lorran Garrison. I am a school psychologist. I'm also the co-founder of Little Brainstorm. I make books on social emotional learning. I do coloring journals. So what I find in my practice is that when I have kids that come into my office and they need to calm down, the coloring helps, and I have a little space so that they could share their thoughts and feelings. So just a little bit more about me. I'm from the island of Guam, which is that little tiny red dot right smack in the middle there. Some of the things that really influenced me were Batman, Little House on the Prairie, Archie, but I never really saw anyone that represented me, who I am. The closest was Nam, and Nam's told from the perspective of the American white soldier. So that wasn't anything that I could relate to, and so I find it, like I said, a very important cause for me to show representation and the need for representation in comic books. So now we have Tara. Tara, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, why you do it, and what inspired you. What's your origin story?
I do it for the money.
Shake it, shake it.
I am Tara Madison Avery. I am a cartoonist, publisher, activist, and cat mom. I have my own publishing imprint, Stack Deck Press, which I founded in 2015. The impetus of forming that imprint was to publish a book for Prism Comics, a nonprofit organization for which I work, for those of you who may be aware of it. Prism Comics promotes LGBTQ, AIU, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Rho comics creators, and comics fandom all across the country. And you can find us at Table 1401 this year. In recent history, as I have published the world's first all-trans comics anthology, We're Still Here, for which we won an Ignatz Award, meaning we're classy. And a couple of contributors here. Sonya is here, also contributed to the book, and Knave also contributed to the book. So also, I have contributed to other books of trans interest, including The Outside, which was edited and published by the creator of Magical Boy. If you're a fan of Magical Boy fans, anyone? The Cow, it was released last year, and Zhen and Liam will be able to tell you more about that because they are also co-contributors to that book. I was born in Connecticut and lived in Maryland, but for the most part I grew up in Kansas, which makes me, I have dual citizenship. I'm an American, and I am also a subject of the Holy Kansan Empire. And because I own real estate there, I still have to genuflect from time to time to the spooky billboards along the side of the road. I have always, I've been reading comics ever since I could read, ever since I was a wee sprat, coming up on 50 years of comics reading now. And Of course, when you're growing up, and especially in the 80s and the 70s, 80s, 90s, there's not a lot of trans representation, not a lot of positive trans representation. So, you know, as I like to say, when there's no representation, even bad representation is good representation, because then you realize, that's me, you know. And I think that that's sort of the power of negativity. It really has driven me forward in my life. Do we want to sort of go through, or do we want to? How do we want to do this? Does everybody want to introduce themselves, or do you want us to kind of proceed with our whole?
You can proceed with the whole thing.
The whole enchilada. So,
the whole enchilada.
So what you see up there, I'll give you the quick 411. That's We're Still Here, which I previously mentioned. And that's The Outside, which I previously mentioned. And Death Saves. I'm also a dork. I also play Dungeons and Dragons and Mutants and Masterminds. And Death Saves is a series of books by Josh Trujillo that covers comics creators' real life tabletop RPG campaigns, and about the characters, the beloved characters that meet untimely fates due to bad dice rolls, poor play, or just, you know, bonehead stupidity. So, and so that was that.
What
you know,
inspired you? This is the
what
next slide.
inspired me? Well, I'm trying to make money, and but also what inspired me. There are a lot of things growing up that I really responded to. You hit a certain age. I put Love and Rockets up there. Love and Rockets is, you know, sort of ground zero for me, for, you know, positive reflections of queerness in comics. And that was, you know, with Maggie and Hopi. And, you know, both Gilbert and Jaime featured trans and gender nonconforming characters. Crazy Cat was a strip I followed very avidly in high school, and it featured the world's first non-binary comics character back in 1913. If you know anything about Crazy Cat, it was neither male nor female, both, sometimes male, sometimes female, often both or neither. So that was explicit. And Tara Markov from the New Teen Titans was where I got my name when I went down there to get the name change, among others, fun stuff. Jack Kirby, always great. Howard Chaykin, the king of bad representation. In the 80s, every single one of his comics had a villainous, morally compromised trans or gender nonconforming person, and it was hot. So there we go.
Zen, can you follow up with that one?
I'm not that funny and quick on my feet. My name's Zhen. My pronouns are they, them. I do my own comics on social media, web comics, mostly basically strip form comics. I grew up, you know, loving comic strips. I realized I'm autistic as an adult. It helped me understand more why, like, you know, what I was drawn to. I like the simple form of comics. I like how you can distill big ideas into small bits. That's one thing that I think I love about the format. So, like, for me, comics is an opportunity to try to dig into very complex and layered, or, you know, questions we don't have answers to, but present it in a way that is ingestible for most people, yet, you know, can still be so expansive. I feel like comics too it's been multiple things. Like, I've connected with people here through that, and by putting out kind of my own experiences in comics, it's been a way to connect with people and actually find the people that then validate, you know, your own experiences too, just as they find it and feel validated by finding, you know, their experience represented. So yeah, like, I grew up, most of, you know, putting these slides together helped me kind of see what inspired me. A lot of animal stuff. I was always animal obsessed. A lot of my ADHD splatter of, you know, stuff. It was interesting to look at too how both, you know, Western style art and comics and Eastern style stuff, you know, I grew up going to Hong Kong to visit relatives, so grew up with, you know, with all that, and how, you know, both styles kind of influenced what I create and how I create it. But what I like about using animals to represent stuff is you strip away some things that people would identify directly with, so more people can feel like there's less of a barrier to see themselves in the experience that, you know, I'm using the animals to represent and stuff.
Hey, I'm Annalee Newitz. I have 2 careers. One is as a science journalist, and I write books about science, and also as a science fiction writer. I founded a blog called IO9 back when blogs were a thing. And so a lot of people know me from that. And I also now, with my co-founder of IO9, Charlie Jane Anders, I have a podcast called Our Opinions Are Correct, where we put all of our IO9 feelings that are now repressed, we just stick them into audio. So if you miss the old IO9, that's where we are. So I just put book covers up there of books I've written because I write in text. There are some pictures in some of these books, and especially in Terraformers, which just came out last month. There's 3 maps in this book, which makes me extremely excited because, like all normal people, I play Dungeons and Dragons, so I think a lot about maps. And I'll talk in a minute about actually one of the D&D inspirations for the Terraformers, which I think a lot of people will find weird and amusing. But I guess I'll just say, as background, that I also grew up without a lot of representations of non-binary people and very little representation of queer people. I mostly grew up in the 80s and 90s, actually down south in Irvine, which if you've been to Irvine, you immediately probably vibe with why that was a horrible place to be as a teenager. And I found science fiction to be a place where I felt seen. I read this book in high school called Wizard by John Varley. And it's a book, just a regular book about centaur people living inside a giant cyborg in orbit around Saturn, just like a regular kind of book. And the front of the book, instead of having a map of the world, it had a map of ways that the aliens, who are called Titanides, how they can reproduce. These are centaur people with 3 sets of genitals. So they have like front genitals, which you can kind of see, and then they have middle genitals and back genitals. And John Varley, the author, had plotted out like all these different ways that all the different genitals could fit together, and like not in a gross way, like it was literally just like diagrams. And it was like, you could reproduce by having sex with yourself. You could reproduce with 3 partners or 2 partners or 5 partners, and like all these, and he named each of the positions. And it was like, at last, I understand myself. And because it was this way of changing gender and bodies that I'd never encountered, and suddenly I was like, yeah, I don't really have a name for what I am, but I know it's hot, and I know I want to like have sex, so I'm just gonna make a bunch of charts. So I did.
That's the most nerdy thing I've ever heard.
I feel that we've all been there. And so my latest book is The Terraformers. It is a science fiction novel that's set in the very, very distant future on another planet. It focuses on a group of people who are part of a group called the Environmental Rescue Team, which is kind of like Lassie's Rescue Rangers in space, which is why I have Lassie's Rescue Rangers up there. Because that actually did really inspire me when I was a kid. A lot of the stuff that inspired the Terraformers is stuff that I read as a kid. And a lot of the work that the Environmental Rescue Team is doing is kind of running interference with this interstellar real estate corporation that's developing the planet that they're on. And they have to kind of repair damage that is being done by these corporate overlords. And they aren't just humans. The team of people some of them are moose, and some of them are naked mole rats. One of them is a sentient flying train who falls in love with a cat, so now you know where the cat bus came from, which I was very much thinking about as I was working on this book. And they're a very expansive definition of what it means to be people. And that's something that's just really important to me in my work overall. My first novel, Autonomous, is about a gender-confused robot who everyone thinks is a guy because he's like big and bulky and like has armor and big guns and all kinds of other sexy paraphernalia. And so robots don't really have gender, but he just kind of goes along with this pronoun. And then halfway through the book, this is not really a spoiler, people start, for various reasons, referring to this character as she. Nothing changes, but everybody's attitudes do. And in the Terraformers, I kind of went the other way. I wanted to have people who had every kind of body. There's worms, and we have to think about, like, what would be a really good way to help worms get onto a bus? Like, what would the entrance to the bus be like for a worm? We have moose who can fly. We have cats who are investigative journalists. I wanted to show...
Makes sense, that tracks.
That track. And I feel like sometimes in stories about animals, and I don't know if you find this to be true, but sometimes people who write animals will be like, oh, well, rabbit people would be scared, and like cat people would be bitchy, and like moose people would like, I don't know. Beavers would be, beavers would be like industrious, you know. Robots would be good at math. And I was like, fuck that. I want to show people in every kind of body, with every configuration, just being people. And so there's 2 moose characters in this book who have this kind of difficult romance. And they're just very different from each other. You know, it's like a romance, right? It's like 2 people with different personalities trying to figure out how to make it. And so that's kind of the whole goal in the Terraformers, is for you to come away from it thinking about how it doesn't really matter what body you have. You get to be a person. You can change your body. You can still be a person. It might change how you feel about yourself. It might not. And my final story about the Terraformers, which is my D&D story, which is, so, okay, has anybody ever played an Aggretsuko character in D&D? Yeah, thank you. Finally, I love birds. So Aggretsuko are bird people, and in 5th edition, you can play an Aggretsuko. In previous editions, Aggretsuko were mounts. You could ride them, but they couldn't be a POV character. And now that they're a POV character, you can't ride them. They can't be a mount. So I'm like, can I carry someone up this cliff? And the DM's like, no, you can't carry anyone. I'm like, my people are mounts. Like, why can't? No. Once you're a person, you can't be a mount. So in the Terraformers, I have a character who's a moose, who is a mount, and is dealing with a lot of stereotyping about what does it mean to be a mount? Can you really be a person if you're a mount? And anyway, it becomes very involved, and it becomes one of the sort of subplots of the story about can you be a person and can you be a mount at the same time? So anyway, it all started with the Aggretsuko. I highly recommend playing Aggretsuko. They're so awesome, even though they can't carry people anymore.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh God, it's my face. I'm so sorry you have to see that.
My fellow Aggretsuko.
So my name is Liam Coballes. I can't words. I'm so sorry. My pronouns are he, him. Unlike the other panelists here, I do draw. I can draw. I'm capable of that. But I work in the animation industry as a production producer currently. My main job is to take foreign content and actually dub it into English. What I find interesting is that because most of the stuff I do is animated, no one really focuses on the identity of the voice, because they're all focused on what you see, which is the picture. The person who is voicing that character no longer exists. To some people, they're still fans of it, but I think it introduced a really interesting thing to me where anyone, if the voice fits, can be anybody, if that makes sense. My job, and what I'm helping with my studio specifically, is I'm trying to get more queer voices and people of color voices to voice not just the stereotypes not just to cast type them, but to be a person, be a character, which is the goal. And I've been doing my best to try and get new up-and-coming queer voice actors, non-binary voice actors, people of color. And when I told studios, this is my idea, this is the type of thing we should include, everyone was really excited, but everyone was so afraid of how to start it. And I said, well, I'm gay and I'm here, so I'll just do it because everyone's dancing around it. So that is my bit. I guess my inspirations, it mostly stems from anime. I guess because that is the only thing, as an Asian person, that is my sort of representation that is founded upon here. I actually started with anime because I sprained both of my ankles simultaneously and I couldn't participate in gym. So my friend's like, here's this weird comic I found at the library. Turns out it was actually a manga, which is One Piece, that kind of spiraled into my whole journey on.
Have you watched all 800 episodes?
I am not ashamed to admit I've rewatched both the dub and the sub at
Oh
least
my
5
gosh.
times from start to finish, and I
Wow.
have every single volume
That's
of manga.
impressive.
I didn't bring it with me, but I have a One Piece Ita bag, and I have too much merch and too many figures of Zoro. I love that man. He is my gay awakening, and I'm not afraid to say that. But I think what a lot of the shows and things that I've grown up with, I've really subconsciously been attracted to stories that involve journey of identity, whether it's being an Asian American, whether it's my queer identity, or just figuring life out. Because I'm like in my mid-20s now, I have no idea what I'm doing. I constantly wake up and was like, oh God, I'm alive. It's so jarring but so fascinating because as individuals, it's like a domino effect. I'm always like, with other people that have lived a different life than me, I'm always fascinated to hear what they have to say as much as they are probably fascinated, hopefully, to hear what I have to say. And it's just like such an interesting thing. I don't know, like my brain is just like, I don't seek attention, but I like being where everyone's talking because I like hearing people and just understanding like, oh, so that person like understands this because of X, Y, and Z. I understand it as A, B, and C. And it's just, and I guess that's kind of made me feel that as someone who is trans, as someone who is Filipino American, as someone who is just still figuring themselves out, it's something that's important to see in any form of media, that we're not just trans people. We're not just Asian people. We are, like you were saying, we are people living our lives as need be. And of course, society has boxed us, and it's kind of learning to go past it. It's learning what you like and then what you don't like. Even though you not liking something, even though like all the icky, nasty things out there that are currently going on in this world suck, it's good to know why it sucks, if that makes sense. I have no idea if I'm making any sense. But explore the things you hate and understand why you hate it. Learn the knowledge to kind of de-weaponize those people that spread that hate, and then empower other people and get people to not be on your side, but understand where you're coming from. And I think as creators, as people on this earth, as just spiritual forces or amalgamations of whatever, it's just important to just look at a story and just understand where it's coming from and try to relate it back to you, if anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to reiterate what Liam is saying, I think what Liam is saying is that we should be authentic to ourselves and what we like, what we love. We're not a monolith. I mean, you look at this beautiful panel. We come from all different walks of life. And so, yes, get to know us as human beings. I think that's what you're trying to say. Am I correct?
Yes.
Awesome. I got it. Yes, thank you.
But also defeat the haters.
Yes, also defeat the haters.
Yes, also defeat the haters. And now we have beautiful Sonya.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sonya Saturday. I'm a cartoonist, writer, photographer, experimental video person. I used to do art direction for film. I used to work at a voiceover talent agency. I used to be an assistant to a porn star. I used to be a webcam model. I used to do all kinds of things, but mainly I always come back to comics. A lot of my comics over the years have been a lot of like sort of humorous stuff. I tend to do a lot of like dirty humor. I think about sex a lot. And so I tend to put that in my work, and a lot of my work now is comics about me talking about how much I think about sex a lot. So for the last 2 years, I've been doing an online comic strip called The Greatest Thing You've Ever Seen in Your Life, and it's autobiographical. And I just brought out the first print issue of, it's about, thank you, about, hold for applause. It's about half of the strips that I've done for the last couple years, and so I grew up in like a really conservative Jewish community in North Florida, and then then about 2004, I moved to Hollywood to work in the entertainment industry, and that had its ups and downs. And so for like the last 19 years, I've kind of like been all around Hollywood and in and out and discovered things about myself and realized I was trans and transitioned, and now it's like all different. And so my comic strip tends to sort of go back and forth between like my childhood in Florida, like, you know, like being a kid and things happening and not sure what it all meant, and being in high school and college and all this stuff. And then the other half of the strip is like my life now, like just being an out trans woman who tends to walk around the streets of Hollywood in the day because I don't drive and I carry an umbrella and I have pink hair and I'm very conspicuous. So people like to say things to me, whether or not I want them to. And so I touch on a lot of that stuff in the strip too, and some of it's, I tend to think about my life in, like, I handle everything through humor. So I can get kind of serious in my stuff, but for some reason I always have to have some little ha 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 at the end. Like, haha, isn't that funny? Originally, all my work was like through characters. I like a lot of horror stuff, so I used to have like monsters and demons and violent stuff, but it was all about like romance too and everything, and it all has to be like emotional and also bloody. So, but over the years, I was lucky enough to be invited to contribute stories to various anthologies, one of which, of course, was the one that Terra published. We're still here. Those stories were specifically autobiographical stories, and so that, over the years, that sort of led me into being more comfortable into just honestly speaking about who I am and what my life is like and where I've been and what I've seen, and I've done a lot. And so I like to talk about all that stuff. So that's sort of what led to the comic strip. And it's going pretty well. I feel really good about it. You know, there's other things I do. I've done some like mainstream work. I did a couple like political coloring books a few years back. I did the 2016 Republican presidential candidates coloring an activity book, which got me some attention. And He Who Shall Not Be Named was the only person on the cover, and he wasn't even the nominee at the time. And so, you know, sorry. And but then like a few years later, Simon & Schuster hit me up, and they were like, "We want to do the exact same thing you did 4 years ago, but about the Democrats. Do you want to do that?" And I was like, "I will take your money." And so that happened. But I always tend to sort of go back to the indie stuff. I like to be really independent, and I don't like people telling me what to do, except for in certain contexts. So anyway, just to wrap up about what's going on, like I said, I live in Los Angeles. I'm actually going to be teaching a class pretty soon, a comics making class. So if you want to like look up my stuff, it's going to be starting in a couple weeks, and it should start being weekly. So if you want to come and learn how to make comics with me, physically make comic books with me by hand, there's an opportunity to do that. Follow me and buy my books. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Knave, please tell us about yourself. What is your origin story?
I was bitten by a radioactive gay. I do the comic book Transcat. She's a fighting cat girl who fights the police. This is a great crowd. Look at all of you guys. How come there's nobody sitting here? There's like a line of no people.
It's like a midsection.
Yeah, that second row.
I think this side should fight that side. So yeah, I've been doing the comic, mostly self-published, with some help from Terra and Stack Deck Press and Prism Comics since about 2014. It's a concept that's been with me since about 2010, but it took me that long to like get a version of it that I liked. And yeah, she's just like this little teenage fighting cat girl. She puts on a magic cat hat, and she gets her desired gender outlook basically through magic. And she decided to use that power to fight evil, which in her world is the cops. And it's kind of autobiographical, but it's based off my life if my life was a lot more funny and action-packed and romantic. But yeah, so yeah, I've been doing it since 2014. I am really hard working on my 13th issue. It's been a long one. And this year actually marks the 9th year in a row that Cartoon Network has not called me back. So that's nice. And this is my third WonderCon, I think, and most of it's all thanks to Tara. Tara's the one pulling the strings behind my entire career. We got together one day and said, wouldn't it be cool if somebody made comics for gays? And here we are, so you're all welcome. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Yay! So, Knave, tell me a little bit more about your inspirations here in this.
I grew up watching a lot of television. That's basically it. I love Ninja Turtles a lot growing up. Kind of just like graduated into other like weird types of fighting comics and cartoons and stuff of that nature. But also I really adore comedy. I think that Transcat's a really good melding of the two. She fights and makes jokes, but not in an annoying Peter Parker kind of way. But I also really adore indie comics. You'll see up there Ghost World and American Splendor. I think American Splendor, more than anything, kind of influenced my writing style because Harvey Pekar is such an angry man. And I think that everyone at this table kind of identifies with like a certain level of frustration in their lives. And I think that we've all found ways to deal with it with comedy. And I got that from Harvey, definitely from Harvey.
Thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves and telling us your origin story. I'm going to open up the floor now for anyone to have questions, and the first couple of people will get a free hardcover book of a book that I consulted on called Identity. This was supported by Anthony Zeiker, who is the founder of the CSI TV show, and so he's one of his pet projects, passion projects, is to support kids telling their true story. This story here is about Corey Mason. She authored the book herself, and we drew her story to talk about how her transition. So first three questions of anyone. I saw you. You were excited. You put your hand up.
Question.
Yes.
All of you. Have any of you read The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin? Just you?
Yeah.
I can't read.
What's the question? Just the question is, have we read it?
Yeah, just have you read it?
I have.
I have not, unfortunately.
It's great.
I read it, it was terrible.
This is how we're going to get the two sides of the room to fight.
Who else has a question? You, yes.
Yeah, I have a question. My question is, I used to be a theater geek, still am, but like, but now I realize I actually want to commit to acting. Now that I realize I'm also trans, and noticing like the kind of roles I do want to take up. And I guess I was wondering now with that realization, do y'all happen to have any resources in the entertainment industry for trans people?
Ann Thomas. Ann Thomas is a trans woman. She specializes in, she's an agent for trans actors, voice actors, screen, stage. And if you want to come down to table 1401, the Prism Comics table, I can give you her information. And she is a trans herself, and she has, gotten a lot of my friends and associates work as trans actors.
You could always be Disney's 11th first gay on-screen kiss.
You could. You honestly could.
Okay, I have a question over here. Spider Gwen.
Do you have any recommendations for publications or groups of LGBTQ, especially trans comic creators?
Tara. Talk to Tara.
Blankly into the void.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own imprint. I do focus on a lot on trans stuff, but we can, again, if you come down to Prism, we can take you through. There's a whole lot of representation now. This is, I mean, it's so much different than it was even 10 years ago, where trans stories are being taken up by major publishers like Scholastic, and they're for younger readers too, which is, they are not, explicitly sexual or explicitly, they're just very heartfelt stories for, so yes, there's so much stuff. And, if you are a creator, if you're an author, then you can find somebody, and I can help you with that. So.
I just want to add to that. There's actually there's also a website called the Queer Cartoonist Database. It's run by Mari Nomi, and Mari actually runs several cartoonist databases, including Cartoonists of Color database. And but if you go to like the Queer Cartoonist Database, I'm not sure it's the exact URL, but it's out there. There's a lot of different like queer creators on there, and you can even like filter them by trans identified creators. Everyone like puts their own information in, so no one's being outed. We're all putting our own stuff in there. So if you want to like find people that way, that's a really good resource.
Yeah. I had another question over here. Oh, yeah.
You push through with projects because I have way too many projects on my Google Drive, and I always have trouble finishing them.
I'd like to feel this one because I've worked very steadily on one project forever. The trick that I always tell people is you have to become emotionally invested in seeing what your character does. Or where they wind up. Because I too am like that in a way. I start and abandon many, many things. But Transcat has been going for so long because I have come to really care about where her character goes, where she ends up, what she does, and who she gets to beat up and who she gets to kiss,
You should also allow yourself to shelve some projects, because if you have too many, of course, you're going to get overwhelmed. Yeah. You have to kind of assess all of your projects and say which is something that I need to dedicate all I can, like put all my chips in, and which can wait a year or two.
Yeah. And we can also talk about, if you're creators of some stripe or other, you've heard about idea debt. There's like an idea that you feel that is very important to you at one point and your life moves on, and it's not as important to you, but you feel like you're beholden to this thing that you've invested time and effort into, certain sort of sunk cost fallacy for creative activity. You can let some of those things go and focus on, focus on something you think you can finish. If you've got something like the Brothers Karamazov or a short story and nothing's finished, well, finish the short story, Put a mark on the board and say, oh, I scored one, great, and then go back to the Karamazov. But I also think about idea equity. It's like, because sometimes that old idea that is that you moved away from kind of begins to appeal to you again, and then you got all this stuff, all these toys you built, and you can play with them and do something else with them.
Yeah, I just wanted to add two practical things to that, which I think the idea equity and idea debt framing is really good. I think also you have to remember that everything you write is practice, and it's part of what it actually is helpful. Even if you don't finish, you've got some of that idea equity, and the next thing you write will be better. But on a practical level, as someone who's had to finish a lot of books on deadline, it actually helps to have an accountability buddy. When I was trying to finish the Terraformers during the pandemic, and I just was like, all I want to do is have edibles and watch Deep Space Nine. I did a Deep Space Nine rewatch. Anyway, I had an accountability buddy, and we would meet up every day on Discord at the end of the day and just tell each other how many words we'd written. And he was working on a book, and his book was about productivity, so I knew he would kick my ass every day. He would be like, I wrote 2,000 words, and I'd be like, I wrote 400 words. But it helps just to have a person who just will, without any judgment, just listen to you at the end of the day and be like, okay, I hear that, you wrote that amount, and this is what I did.
I was wondering, how has your art changed through transition, if it has?
When I was younger, I didn't want to be the queer cartoonist because I thought that would compromise my work and people's opinion of it. And then when I started introducing, as I transitioned, I introduced more queer characters, more bi characters, trans characters, and I got a lot more attention and a lot more readers. And then I realized, no, if you put it out there, if you build it, they will come sort of thing, because people want that stuff and they're not used to seeing it. And so make it about you and yourself. That was what I learned, and I just that's the main way who I included in my stories.
For my work, for the first a lot of years of me making art and comics and all that, I knew I had things inside of me that I needed to get out, but I didn't know what. So most of the work I made, it was like, I would make something and I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And my family would be like, we wish you wouldn't do this. And other friends were like, I don't know why you're doing this. But I just kept doing it because there was something, you know? And it wasn't really until, like, I didn't click into my head that I was trans until I was 35, you know? But then once, you know, and then once I started taking action in that direction and like becoming who I really am and being open and honest with myself and the world about who I am and about what I believe and what I think, and actually being able to express what it is that matters to me, I suddenly found that I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about in my work. You know, like my vision became much more clear. The quality of my work, I feel, just like went way, way, way up. Like I just got better with photography and drawing and video and everything, just because I knew what my reason was at that point, and I was confident enough in myself to be able to actually be able to do it without feeling like, oh God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And now I'm like, no, this is what I am doing. So I feel like just being able to be honest and true about yourself and having your own intention just makes your work so much better. So
I think also for me, like, what's interesting, you know, also realizing kind of late, being like, oh, I'm trans. It's like being able to look back also at some of the ways I represented myself, and seeing that how I depicted myself was like more aware of who I was than I actually was, you know, and then to be able to look back at how, you know, really I was trying to, like, I was representing myself the way I felt, you know. And, you know, one thing that the internet and putting art out that way has afforded to a lot of people, I think, is that you can kind of be like, this is who I am. And this is how, like, you know, there's pros and cons, but it's like it allowed you to kind of present yourself the way you know yourself to be, and give that to people. And I mean, I do think too, yeah, like, you know, becoming more aware. And like for me, a lot of it too was like I also grew up in a very conservative, like, you know, so a lot of it was getting more confident that if I am honest about my experience, it's not that everybody who sees it is going to be like you know, like, because when you grow up with that being the mindset that's told to you that like, this is what the world is, therefore anything you experience, you're like this like this, you know, complete freak of whatever. Yeah. And it's like to realize that like, oh, if I'm, you know, telling my truth, it's not like everybody who likes my work is gonna suddenly hate my work and abandon. And that was a really hard thing for me to cope with, was because, you know, a lot of the comics I would do had a very wide reach to a lot of people. It was very universal. And there was a big fear of like, oh my goodness, everyone's gonna just turn and run. So, yeah.
Okay, I got a couple over here. I can't say no to them. Okay, please.
I'm not so much on like comic scene, but I'm an artist and I do radio work and audio things. And I kind of shared with Liam about, I guess, highlighting, like choosing people to be in my projects, because I really don't want trans voices in my projects, and I want to know, like, how do I just gather people?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is like a database for trans voice actors, and anytime you're like looking to hire a voice actor, always specify who you're looking for, because actors generally know that there's like a sort of typecast mentalities to things. So if they don't see, like, if you just put, oh, I need a low voice, every low voice person will go your way. But if you start closing the pool up a little bit, it starts getting like, it will flow down to the river you need it to be. So it's more just like, anytime you put a call out post, just say, I'm looking for a trans woman, I'm looking for a trans man, looking for someone non-binary conforming, and just kind of see to it from there.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you, Comic-Con, WonderCon, for supporting. these panels. If you like this, please let WonderCon know that you want to see panels like this more and more because, you know, a few years ago we weren't able to come up and have this type of panel. So thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them in the hallway.